In the early 70s, a group of students at C.W. Baker High School in Baldwinsville, New York, set out to build a radio station that would create a unique broadcasting experience, not only for them, but for a multitude of generations to come. Nearly a half-century later, it's time to hear firsthand from those who went behind the mic, telling the stories of how this station changed their lives, both in the studio and beyond, as we celebrate 50 years of broadcasting excellence on WBXL 90.5 FM. This is The Buzz Goes Gold.
Welcome to another episode of The Buzz Goes Gold. I'm here with what I consider to be one of the most successful WBXL alumni we have so far. Not only has he had a successful broadcasting career, but he's also voiced the intro to the podcast. It's the one and only Rick Deyulio, who is one of the DJs on in the local market. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Jordan. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
What's your class year?
Graduated in 1994.
1994. That's quite interesting. So, we may or may not know what you're up to now, but let's start from the beginning. How did you find out about the station? What made you interested in broadcasting? And give us your pitch as to why and how you joined the station.
Well, I remember the station. Boy, I think I remember it being, I might have been in middle school when I first heard about it. And, the prospect of being on the radio at that time when I was a kid, I just kind of grew up really liking radio and loving music. And that was, it's those two key things for me. I love to communicate with people and I love music. And so you put those together and radio is the perfect medium. And just knowing that Beeville had a radio station in the high school was pretty exciting. And I think, like I said, probably around middle school, I realized it was there and was really excited. It was a long wait to finally get to high school and be able to take the class, but I got the chance to do it when I got into 10th grade, I think,
yes.
and took the class. Yeah.
So you were lucky enough. I wasn't as lucky, but I don't know. You were lucky enough to be taught by the legendary Al Jenner. What was he like, and what was not only that, what was he like, but also, what do you remember most about your classmates taking the class, just being there, being part of it?
The classmates were all different. I'll talk about Mr. Jenner in just a second. The classmates were all different. I mean, there were people that were, people that were maybe not the best public speakers. There were people that were extreme extroverts that wanted to communicate with everybody and wanted to talk all the time. There were people that didn't like to talk a lot. So there were a lot of different personalities is what I remember. And I remember a lot of kids that, wanted to use this to become superstars. And so they might overact a little bit when they're on the radio. And there were some people that really took it seriously and wanted a career in broadcasting like I was. As for Mr. Jenner, what a character, what a personality, and may he rest in peace. He just passed away just a couple of weeks ago. And I was supposed to see him the Monday after he passed away. We were supposed to have one of our monthly breakfasts, which we did for the last several years of his life. And boy, what a wonderful experience it was to have a teacher like that, and then later on get to know him as an adult and be able to connect with him on that level, and to see each other as equals. And so to discuss radio and to discuss new technology and to talk about AI and a lot of the developments that are coming along now, things that we couldn't even fathom 30 years ago when I was in his class. It was a real blessing to have that experience with him. So I'll miss him a lot, but he was quite a guy and he taught us a lot.
Yes, we'll definitely get into the future of radio or the current state of radio. I have a lot of thoughts with that. We'll save that for later in the episode. But from what I hear, I didn't have him as a teacher, but talking to a lot of the WBXL alumni who did, sounds like he was probably one of the most favorite teachers that you'd ever have, not just in high school, but your entire K through 12 career, if you want to say things like that. So we all know you as a big hotshot on the radio now, but where did it be? Take us through your first few shifts on the air back at the Buzz, and most importantly, how would you compare your early days on air with where you are now?
First couple of days on the air were, obviously you were a little bit nervous. I remember, I don't remember the first time I opened the mic there, but I do remember, the sort of that general time period. And I remember being a little bit nervous and finding my voice. And I think we all have to do that. But, you start by pretty much just reading a script, and there's not a lot of personality that comes out when you're reading a script, but eventually you start writing things. And I think I was doing newscasts, and you start writing things and you start putting things in your own words, and you start to, develop a little bit of a personality. And so you develop more inflection in your voice, and you show a little more charisma that way. People want to listen to you. You build a personality that way. And so it was tough for the first several broadcasts, but it got easier the more you do it. That's kind of the way it is for everybody. I think it's really the more you do it, the better you get at it. And if you become a full-time radio person, if you become a full-time announcer or broadcaster in any way, the more you do it, the better you get. And if you're doing it every day, you can't help but get good at it.
I'd have to agree with you on that. When I first started, now this was early mid-2000s there, I started similar to you. I would write things out and I would just read them verbatim. I had to. That's how I felt like at the time, because if I didn't write it out, I felt like I would be missing my flow there, meaning wouldn't know exactly what to say, and the whole thing would be just off. But then as I did this more frequently, eventually got to just going to more freestyle, and occasionally I do the radio station's 89, but I'm not full time like you are doing a professional on-air career, but I do a lot of things on the side, more about that later. And I just feel like now I'm free to be more improvisational, and it does sound a little bit more natural as well. But I've come a long way, like you have. You're right. The more you do it, the better that you become, and you find your voice, and you're able to be more comfortable with it. It's just the time that you put into it, the effort, and you want to get let me just try to figure out the best way to put this. The more time and the desire to get better and to just improve your confidence, personality, find that inner voice, and find the style that works for you and for the listeners. Which leads me to the next question. Did you do morning? I'm sorry. Did you do a shift during the school day or at night?
I started out before, I think the first year, if I remember, the first year while I was taking the class, we all could you could sign up to do a shift for a period during the school day. And so I would do, various different periods during the school day. And then, those of us that kind of had a knack for it were rewarded with a nightly show or a show at night. It was a weekly show that would air once a week at night. And so I got a night slot, and I think I was doing Wednesday nights, and it might have been at it might have been something like 9 to 11 or something like that. 8 to 11 might have been. Kind of hard to remember. It's been 30 years, but I think it was 8 to 11 on Wednesday nights.
Okay. And what music did you play?
I played rock, the stuff that I'm playing now all these years later on the radio. It was a classic rock show. So, even back then I was a big fan of old stuff like the Doors and the Beatles and the Rolling Stones.
Oh, that's interesting. And it's timeless now. So it comes full circle. You played it back then, when it was still cool, and you play it now when it's also still cool. That's just amazing. So we'll probably get into that into a little bit, but let me see. I have kind of a musical mind similar to you, so let me just throw out a few. We'll play a little bit of a game. Let me throw with you either an album or a song title, and you guess Here's what I'll do. I'll throw out a name of a song, and then you try to give me. It's just going to be song, no artist, but then you have to give me the name of the band, the year it was released, the album that it was on, but also the chart but most importantly, the chart position on the Billboard or whatever they were using on the top four. Actually, I'm throwing that out. Let's do this different game. I'm going to give you 3 different songs. We'll just do one round of this. I'll give you 3 different songs, and you have to tell me which out of the 3 was the highest on which out of 3 scored the highest position on the chart. So here we go.
Oh boy, you're asking a lot of me. That's a tough one. We'll try it.
Okay. I Can't Get No Satisfaction is number 1. Hey Jude, number 2. And then how about something from the Bee Gees, Staying Alive.
Okay, and you're asking me what the highest charting one of those 3 was?
Yes. Or what you think?
Boy, that's a good question. I'll go with the Bee Gees.
I gotta look that. I'm looking that up. I'm cheating. I'm actually cheating. Let me just take a look here. Now, this is based on the year-end chart. This is based on the year-end chart from Wikipedia. Okay, so Staying Alive charted at number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 in that would have been 1970. I'm sorry. So number 4 on the U.S. Billboard Hot 100 in 1978. Then we had Hey Jude, which I'm looking it up. I'm just looking it up here on the. Sorry, I should have been more prepared by this, but that's what happens when you improv a game and you don't have any show prep. Billboard Hot 100. Where is it? Oh, here we go. U.S. Billboard Hot 100 recurrence. Hey Jude was number 14 in 2010. In 1976, it wasn't even on the Billboard charts. And we'll do the Stones last. So I'm very embarrassed. I'm trying to get this. I'm trying to get this the best as I can. The Stones. That Stones single. U.S. Billboard Hot 100 didn't even chart. So you're technically correct because I was going for the U.S. Billboard Hot 100, and "Staying Alive" was number 4 on the U.S. Billboard Hot 100. The other two didn't even chart at the end of the year, so I'll give it to you.
Okay.
And thank you for playing my little game.
I'll take it.
Anyway, let's get back to the regularly scheduled programming. So, fast forward to... Oh, hold on. Let me go back. Sorry. We have to talk about the studio equipment like I do with every guest. What played the music? How is it different than what you use now?
We were using carts, and carts are kind of like a little bit, if you understand the concept of an 8-track tape, carts were shaped like an 8-track tape. They were kind of a loop, so you could really only fit one song on a cart. There was enough tape in it. The carts were various different lengths. So if you had a 3-minute song, you'd look for a 3.5-minute cart, and you could play the song from a CD and record it directly onto the cart and play the carts. And so we used carts mostly for the music and the commercials. And then eventually there was a CD player put in there. I think it was toward the end of my time there. So I didn't get to use it much, but it was mostly carts, and you would have to sit in the production room for a couple of hours in advance and cart up all the songs you wanted to play. So if you had a 3-hour show and you want to cart up 3 hours worth of music, you could do the math. You have to do it in real time, and it's going to take a while, and you have to bulk erase the cart to make sure it's blank, erase the song that was on it previously, and then put it into the machine and check your levels, and eventually just transfer the music from the CD to the cart. So those were what we were using. And it was when I look back on it now, it was quite a chore to do all of that.
I can tell for sure. Nowadays, it's all digitized. Mm-hmm. It's all computer generated. You don't have to do that anymore. Now, when I was on WBXL, it was a little bit more advanced than that, but not as advanced as what stations use today. We used what's called instant replay machines, which were essentially glorified iPods. Mm-hmm. Now, the music director would have to record songs into that, but I was lucky enough to just take a look in the book, enter a number, and then play it. There was no playlist, though. Mm-hmm. You didn't have did you have a playlist, or did you just play whatever you wanted?
We had a color wheel, and all of the carts were broken down by color. And so the color wheel was, it was a round, it was essentially like a clock, and each 5-minute slot on the clock had a different color. So wherever you were in the hour, that would dictate the color that of the cart you would have to go and grab. And so, you might, at the top of the hour, you'd be in the red category, which was current songs. So you'd go to the reds, and you'd look at a red cart that hadn't been turned over upside down, meaning it had just been recently played. And you'd grab one that was right side up, and you would play that one. And then you might move into the blue category next, which might be recurrent, which was an older song, and you'd repeat the process. And so you'd go through the various different colors, and you might play 3 reds in an hour. You might play 3 blues in an hour or something like that. And eventually, when all of the carts were turned over, then the music director would come in and turn them all back right side up and start the process over again. So it sounds primitive today to think about it, but it worked for the time, and it was fun, and it kind of caused a little bit of trouble if people would play something that was already turned over. You didn't want to do that. You were breaking the rules that way.
Interesting. No, you're the second guest who's actually brought that up. I believe we had Andrea Scala Atchison on, who also described how the wheel worked. Mm-hmm. So that's pretty interesting how you look at it. it was a primitive version of the modern day clocks that we have now.
Right.
So I didn't have the wheel was long gone when I was there. There was no playlist except for when the DJs went home at night. You could just pick anything in the book, literally, and play it. But that was the glory, or that was the freedom that one had at a variety station. Mm-hmm. So now we get to go into where you went off to next. So after graduation from Baker, you went to what university, and tell us what happened from there.
I took a bit of a circuitous route to get to where I am today. I started, I went to college at SUNY Oswego, and I did 2 years there, and I was commuting because I had gotten a job, my first professional radio job at 95X. And so I started working there, but it was an overnight position, which, nowadays there really aren't overnight positions anymore. But I was doing full-time overnights and trying to hold down a full-time schedule in college. So I would commute every day to Oswego, and I would do my classes up there, maybe from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. or something like that, drive back home, sleep for a couple of hours, and then get up and be at work by 11 p.m. And then I would work overnight, and then I'd be done at about 7 a.m., go home, try and maybe take a quick nap, eat some breakfast, and then repeat the process all over again. So I did that for a couple of years. And then eventually I left school without finishing, took another radio job at TK99. I moved kind of across the street, as they say, and spent some time there for about 7 years, went back to school to finish up, and then was doing some different things. I worked in the political realm for a while. I did lobbying and government affairs work, and then came back to radio in 2012, and that's where I've been ever since.
Oh, I see. So you left. So that's quite interesting. Didn't know that you left school to focus on something else first. Speaking of Oswego, I know there's a station up there called WNYO. Heard of it? WNYO.
Yes. Yep.
Did you were you on it, or?
No. As a matter of fact, strangely enough, in my time there, I never saw the station, never went in there, never had anything to do with it. It sounds weird, but I wasn't really much interested in that because I was already doing professional radio at the time at 95X. So while I was a student there, I had a full-time job at a professional radio station. So I really didn't feel the need to do it. And it was, I think it may have just, I may not have had time in my schedule to do it. So, I'm trying to think back 30 years and remember, but I think it was that I just didn't have the time to do it. And, if you've already got a job in a professional in the world that you want to be, you really didn't need to do that. That was the way I looked at it at the time.
Oh, that's interesting. Well, that to each their own.
Mm-hmm.
What did you think of better? Compare your time. So, how would you compare your time at 95X versus the station that you are today?
I was a lot younger when I was at 95X. I started out there just sort of doing part-time work, just, driving the promotional vehicles and setting up promotions and things like that. And doing only the occasional air shift. And then eventually I got the full-time shift at night. I worked with some real characters, that's for sure. I was the young guy, so I didn't have a whole lot of cachet with the bosses. I was still new. I was still kind of finding my feet, kept my mouth shut, did what I was told. And I worked, like I said, I worked with some really strange people at the time. Got to know them a little bit, but really didn't make a lot of money. And eventually when I got the offer to move to TK99, that was when I was given a chance to develop a little bit more and to be on the air, at better times. I wasn't relegated to just being overnight or 5 a.m. or something like that. So it was a different experience moving from one station to the other. And it just sort of, I feel like I grew up when I got over to TK99, and it allowed me to become more of a personality.
That makes a lot of interest. That makes a lot of sense because, again, I'm not in the professional field. The closest thing that I have, and the closest experience that I have to being a professional radio station was on WJPZ.
Mm-hmm.
Because even though I'll let you in on a little secret, and we don't really share this as much, even though there's students at SU, Syracuse University, we take pride in presenting ourselves as a professional station that competes against 93Q and Hot 107.9 and all these other radio stations. The fact that we're students, that doesn't bother us. Just like at WBXL, the fact that we were students didn't really diminish the experience. We were professionals back then. So, but I have an idea of what you mean there. When you take anything to the next level, it's a transitional experience, and no two stations are the same. So, that's finding your voice, finding your comfort zone, finding your personality. And it sounds like you really did when you joined the Galaxy Media Empire over at TK. Now, speaking of lessons learned, please explain more about the lessons that you've learned from WBXL and beyond, but particularly the lessons that you learned during those foundational years at WBXL. Where do they carry you to where you are now?
Well, you learn when you're at WBXL, you learn a lot of things that serve you well throughout the rest of your broadcasting career, should you choose to go into broadcasting. For instance, you learn proper enunciation. You learn how to speak properly. You learn things like inflection. What is inflection? Well, it's if my voice goes up, if I emphasize something I'm saying, and maybe I want to put a little extra emphasis on a certain thought, your voice might go up, or you might get a little bit louder, or that's inflection. And so you learn very basic fundamentals like that at WBXL that help you become a better broadcaster. And it helps you, it sort of unlocks that mystery to how to become a professional. That was what we learned from Mr. Jenner, because he was a professional broadcaster. And so he was able to impart that stuff to us. And so, things like that seem incredibly simple stay with you throughout your radio career. Those are good habits to develop. And once you develop a good habit, it becomes second nature. It's something that doesn't go away. And so if you speak before a crowd, if you're up on stage introducing a band at a concert, or if you're in a bar hosting some sort of event, or if you're on the radio in a studio by yourself where there's nobody else around, you still bring those same fundamentals with you. You speak properly, you get your point across in a cogent way. And those are the things that I learned at BXL, and those have always stayed with me, and they'll always stay with me. And those will be the things that I teach people now. Those will be what I teach young people.
Yeah, I also have to argue that some of the life lessons that I've learned, not just how to say certain words, not just the fundamental broadcasting skills, but life skills in general. And the example that I always give to all of my guests is commitment. Commitment from others and myself, if you want to say so. But where I'm getting that is, when I was on WBXL, I would interview people from outside in the community, and either fellow students or people outside the community. And when I had a guest that was scheduled but didn't show up, I was a little bit disappointed. And but then I realized the show had to go on. So even though I was a little bit disappointed about that particular guest or that group of guests not showing up, or something else that put a screw in the plans, even I have to get over the disappointment, refocus on the job ahead of me, and then adapt to making the show the best that I can be. So I tell you this because I would say that learning inflection, things of that, the basic fundamentals for being a broadcaster, they're important, but so are the general life lessons like commitment and adaptability and responsibility that also carry me throughout my life in general as well today. So
agreed.
So
yeah,
now,
there's some things, and yeah, if I could just add to that, I mean, obviously you want to, you learn to think on your feet, as you said, and that's something that's very important because you're going to be live on the air, whether it be TV or radio or broadcasting on the internet. You're going to be live, and things are going to happen, and curveballs will be thrown at you, and maybe somebody will say something during the course of an interview that catches you off guard. And so you really have to be even keeled. And so that goes along with what I was saying a little bit earlier, where you just have to do it as much as you can and become as comfortable as you can. And then you think on your feet a little bit better. So if somebody does throw a curveball at you during a live interview, or maybe a piece of equipment malfunctions while you're in the middle of a broadcast, you can handle it. It's not the end of the world. And the public that's listening or watching, they're going to give you plenty of leeway. They understand that things will go wrong, but you learn those very basic things.
Yep, absolutely. So you also mentioned something about teaching other people. When do you get the opportunity to teach others about radio during your career?
Nothing recently, but in the past, over the years, I've been invited to speak. I've been back to Oswego. I think I've come back to Baker High a couple of times, and met students and spoke before. I think Mr. Jenner had me back years ago. I was back when the next gentleman took over after Jenner. Came back and spoke, and I've been asked as well to do some other things, to work for some other, for some other radio clubs and groups as an advisor. So I've done a little bit of that over the years. It's not something I do regularly, but I do it when I can and when I'm asked.
Okay, yes, the next advisor who took over after Jenner, I must have had. His name was Peter Hahn, and he was a professor at Oswego, to bring things full circle.
That's who it was. That's right. It was Peter Hahn.
Yep, I only had him for 1 year, but he was my Jenner because I didn't know Jenner at the time.
Right.
So that comes full circle because he also taught as a professor at SUNY Oswego.
Mm-hmm. I didn't know that. He may have told me that, but I probably forgot about it.
Okay, so let's bring things to more to the present. So I consider to you, just because I don't really know anybody else who's had such a track record as being a professional broadcaster, still doing it full-time professionally after WBXL. What is it? I have to ask you about the current state of radio, or at least what the consensus may be. There's been a lot of opinions out there these days saying that not only is radio as a whole medium out to die, but it feels like local personalities aren't really being seen as much as an asset anymore. What's your take on this, and where do you see the value of still keeping the local voices on the air and not going with national syndication as much?
Obviously, I'm biased. I believe in local voices. I'll give you an example. There's a lot of large companies out there, the iHeartMedias of the world, and it's no secret what they're doing. They've kind of cleaned out a lot of their local buildings, and they've got voice tracking. They're piping people in from from one or two cities, and those people are doing 3, 4, 5, 6 markets, however many they can do. But let's say, for instance, this week at the time that we're recording this, our community has just had, a pretty tragic couple of days. We've lost a couple of police officers, and that's really not something. If you've got some guy that's recording a show that you're listening to, and he's in Cleveland, Ohio, or he's in Tulsa, Oklahoma, or he's somewhere else, they have no real connection to your area. So they can't really speak with any sort of empathy. And I think that undermines the idea of local radio. I feel like it's an unfortunate byproduct of downsizing and kind of the corporatization of radio. And when you have voices that really don't know anything about your area, I've heard people on the air in this market mispronounce Salina Street and call it Salina Street. Now, if I'm in my car and I hear someone say Salina Street, I kind of laugh a little bit. It doesn't lend a lot of credibility to your radio station and to your company. And so a lot of the people that you hear on the air on some of these big stations that are piped in from other areas are very generic. They can't speak to your area. If they do, they might go on a local website and look up a couple of names and try to throw those out and make it sound like they're a local person. But it's really, you can tell when someone knows that they're local, and when someone is from your area and can speak to you as a member of your community. I think there's great value in that still. I think that'll always be. I think that's a universal thing. I think it's always going to be that way. People want to hear a voice from their local community, someone they know. And I think even though commercials annoy people, sometimes you want to hear local commercials. Maybe you want to find that guy who puts a roof on your house, a company that, maybe there's a local car dealer that you want to talk to, or you need that local aspect of things. And if you lose that, I think you lose a lot more than radio as a medium. I think you lose a connection to each other locally as people. I think the radio medium, I don't think is dying. I don't think it ever will. I think as long as there are cars with radios in them, there's always going to be terrestrial radio stations. They'll always exist. They may be in a different form, and they may be doing different things in the future, but they'll always be there because it's free. Whereas you pay for Sirius XM, and you pay to subscribe to other streaming services and things like that. So it's always going to be an option. Maybe there will be fewer people listening to it, but it'll be an option. And that's kind of my thought on where terrestrial radio is now.
Yeah, because a lot of it is on apps.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned iHeartRadio. That's been out for at least a decade or more. But that's where we find. So, for example, that's where we find most people listening. But when I say most people, that's not really accurate, because I'm sure there's still a live audience who, I know there's a big audience who does the traditional AM FM, but then let's say for example, I'm in Syracuse, and I know there's a station out in Albany that I like to listen to. 99.5 The River. They do their morning show with the celebrity birthday game. But if I'm in Syracuse, I have to use the iHeart app. That's the only way I can get it.
Sure.
So, but that also opens up an opportunity for you to discover other markets while staying in your home region.
There's nothing wrong with that at all. I mean, that to me is, you're discovering local radio in a different market, and that's totally fine. I like that. I do like traveling and hearing what the local stations are doing and hearing local people from different cities on the air. But I think, pardon me, I think the biggest problem now is just having people that aren't from your market trying to masquerade as your neighbor, and I just don't, I find that, I mean, it's okay if you're doing it on a satellite and you're just broadcasting to the nation. That's one thing, but I just find it a bit, I find it a bit strange that someone is broadcasting from another market to try and sound like they're a local voice in your area. And I've had to do that before. So, and it's extremely difficult. And I don't have the time to sit and research, what's going on in Bangor, Maine, but I've been asked in the past to broadcast up there, and it's difficult to do.
Yep, it is. And that's why we're very fortunate to have you and Ted and Amy on 93Q and all the other truly local personalities who have stuck with it even over the years. I know, for example, Galaxy, the Galaxy cluster takes pride in keeping local voices on the air. Not only you, the TK99. I listen to ESPN, so I'm a big fan of the ESPN Syracuse stations. And let me say, if shows like Orange Nation or the 315 with Brian Higgins were not on the air, you've lost a listener, because especially with the Syracuse sports fan base the way it is here. I mean, those people who work on those shows, they provide a voice and perspective that's unique to this market, and I think they do a very spectacular job telling the story of, in this case, the Syracuse sports fan base, what the Syracuse sports teams are up to doing. So that's just one example of what you're talking about, keeping it local and sound and knowing what you're talking about.
Right.
I've also heard you voice some of the commercials over there as well. So it was quite interesting how you were talking about hearing local commercials, because what you're doing is you're adding, you're sending their message across, making sure to get their message and their point across as quickly or as efficiently as you can. And that leads me into the next question. What's the process like? And what I mean by that is, where do you, not necessarily the behind the scenes stuff that goes into it. I'm more curious about the pride that you take, or what it means to be a voice for those businesses, and lend your voice to getting the word out. And I know, as a small business owner myself, I take pride in getting the word out, promoting it. So, where do you see your role in helping those businesses get their products and services to market?
I don't take that lightly at all. I see my role as, as being the proper voice, and giving them a good product, a good piece of audio, that conveys their message, that conveys it convincingly. So, again, if I have to adopt a, kind of a gruff concert announcer voice to talk about that AC/DC concert, or if I have to develop kind of put on a gentle voice over some light jazz music for a classy restaurant. You tailor your delivery to the material and to the client. And so, I if you've got a bridal show coming up, I'm certainly not going to deliver that like a concert or a monster truck show. So, I find that you have to be very deliberate in how you put a commercial together. Sometimes it's not only me voicing the commercial, but there are times where I'm working with the client and they come in and voice the commercial with me. So I will produce the commercial using the client's voice. And I find that there's a lot of value in that too, because a lot of times a client, the business owner, can speak more authoritatively about their business than I can as an announcer. I'm just reading a script, but they can speak from the heart about what they've created, the business that they've created and the business they own. So, commercials work in many different ways, and you have to just look at the subject matter of each commercial and decide what will work best to put their message across. And so, you think about that before you go ahead and turn the mic on and start recording. And so there's a lot of work and a lot of thought that goes into putting a commercial together.
We're about to wrap up here, but let's bring this back to so you talked about the lessons that we'll save final thoughts for the end. Let's go back to WBXL. Do you have funny stories, any comic relief that you want to bring to this episode?
Like I said, I probably sound like I'm repeating myself, but it's been 30 years, so I don't have a lot of specific memories. But what I do remember is, as we were talking a little while ago with the color wheel and not running afoul of the rules and playing things out of order or playing things that have already been played. But I remember doing that a couple of times and thinking, you know what? I'm a night guy. I do my show at night. I can get away with some of this. I think I have I think I've built up some goodwill with Jenner. So, but I do remember, I think I got myself in trouble a couple of times with the music director, who came and had to scold me that I'm breaking the rules. And I remember thinking to myself, well, go ahead and tell Mr. Jenner. I mean, he and I are on great terms. I think he's going to let me do it. And so I always felt like I had a little bit of leeway with Mr. Jenner. So I felt like I could break a few rules here and there. Maybe I was totally mistaken and I shouldn't have had that kind of attitude, but I remember having that sort of attitude. And I think it's just a little bit of swagger that you develop after doing it for a while. But I felt like that, and it might not have been a good thing, but that's what I remember from that era.
Okay. Thank you very much for sharing that. Any closing thoughts just about not just your experience at the station, but looking back at your career, where you are this far? How does it feel to still have a radio broadcast, a professional career? Let me just rephrase that one more time. How does it feel to still do this professionally? And what do you have? Perhaps any thoughts or advice that you would like to share to the WBXL alumni and current students, if you will, who did not go into the same path that you did, but are doing other things, having success in their own ways, even though they didn't join a full-time professional broadcasting gig?
I would say we'll go to the advice. We'll do the second part first. My advice to young people that maybe want to do a career if you want to pursue a career in broadcasting, or a career in anything really, what I would say is, apprentice, become an intern. If you're in college, do that internship. Find a company, a local company that you can get in. You may not make any money there if you're an unpaid intern, or maybe you might be a paid intern. But either way, do an internship, because a lot of times nowadays, companies want somebody, when they hire them, they want to know a little bit about them first. And if they have some familiarity with you because you've done an internship and they see that your work ethic is good, and they see that you can create a great product, you're really on the top of the list of hires. You're one of the first people they're going to look to fill a position. And so I think interning, I've always been a huge fan of that. I've had interns over the years that have gone on to become professionals in radio, and they still keep in contact with me. So I'm a huge proponent of that. As to my own career, I would say, I'm blessed to be able to do it still, because a lot of people that kind of came up in the industry when I did aren't doing it anymore, and maybe lost their positions due to downsizing or due to voice tracking from another market, or maybe they worked for a company that wasn't as local as mine. So, I'm very fortunate to be doing what I'm doing. I get to go to work and play music for people every day. I get to talk to people every day. I get to hear from people every day. It's an instant gratification thing where if I say something on the radio, I immediately get a comment on social media or a call or something like that to give me a little bit of feedback on, did I make someone happy with a story that I told, or did I give away a prize that really made somebody's day? Or those kinds of things are, they're very gratifying. On the other side of what I do is the production end. So I do a lot of commercials all day, every day, and interface with different clients. And a lot of those clients that I've worked with over the years and created really good commercials for have become friends outside of the business. So yeah, I'm very lucky to do what I do and to still be doing what I do. And I feel in a lot of ways, there are only a few of us really left that kind of came in when I did and are still doing it at the level that I'm doing it. And a lot of those guys have retired or have been, kind of unceremoniously kicked out of the business. And so I'm glad to be doing what I'm doing, and I hope I can do it for a while longer.
Well, I hope so also. I mean, I consider you to be the most successful of the WBXL alumni because of the career path that you've taken and you've continued to take. Just
Thank you.
One last, and also thank you for voicing the intro. Thank you for taking your time out of your day, out of a whim, and thank you for voicing the intro for us. That was a gift, and you didn't ask me for any money to do that. You did that for free. So again, sincerely, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for voicing the intro that you hear at the beginning of each episode.
Not at all. Happy to do it.
We're almost done. I do want to share with you the station that I've done. So we've talked a lot about innovation, and there are people, including me, but there are people who take the time and energy to create their own stations. So I've actually took time to hand code my own station, and as we're talking about this, I am typing out the URL, the link to the station that I created. But I'm not the only one. I mean, where do you see this going now into internet, TV, not just internet, TV, online services here? People who are not necessarily full-time DJs, they have their own YouTube channels. They have their own social media presence. We've seen a lot more innovation over the years. Where do you see that in the future? And where do you see that going? Where do you see that going for years to come?
Well, I love that everybody can do it now. I love that. There are some people that, have a podcast. I mean, everybody's got a podcast, it seems now. Most podcasts are, I think whatever the stat is, 99.9% of podcasts don't make it because, you do a couple of episodes and then you go, you know what? I think I've run out of ideas. So a lot of them sort of fall by the wayside. There are some really good ones out there. I'm sure yours is going to be one of them. But there are a lot of people that have the ability now through the technology that's available to communicate to a larger audience. And I still believe that the best ones are always, the cream is always going to rise to the top. The best ones are always going to the talent is going to win out, and you'll find an audience. If your product is good, you may not have a huge audience, but you'll have an audience. And be persistent, and your YouTube page, if there's good product there, you'll get people to watch it. But it's an opportunity. I think there are so many opportunities now for people. So that's a great thing. I will tell you too, that when I started doing this, I started out as a very young kid, and this was long before the internet and long before cell phones and long before all this technology. But my dad was an electronics guy, and built me this little transmitter, which was about 2 watts. And when it broadcast across the street, it wouldn't go much farther than that. But I would record music off the radio onto cassettes, and I would have my little cassettes set up, and I would play DJ in my bedroom. And so I started to do that, and people within maybe one house of ours growing up could hear me on AM radio. And so I started doing that, and that was how I started, but nowadays the kid that has a laptop and a camera and a microphone and a YouTube page, a YouTube channel can do that and reach way more people than I did back then. And so I think we've come a long way, and I think that's really, I think you're lucky if you're a kid kind of growing up in this era, because you've got a lot more reach than I did. A 9-year-old can reach a lot more people now than the 9-year-old than me when I was a 9-year-old playing around in my bedroom on a little 2-watt transmitter. So I think it's only going to accelerate from here. Everybody's going to have an opportunity to be a broadcaster. Everybody does now. And like I say, I think the best ones will always, you may not think you have much of an audience, but if you stay at it and be persistent, maybe sometimes you have to spend a little bit of money to promote your page, but your product, if it's good, you'll get the ears and you'll get the eyes.
Absolutely. The funny thing you say that, because I put the link to my station in the private chat here, but essentially what I'm doing now is kind of like what you did as a kid in your bedroom or your living room, but except mine is more electronic, and it covers the World Wide Web. So, and what I'd like to, so if you see the link there,
I do. Yep.
What I'd like to have people do, what I'd like to have WBXL alumni do, starting hopefully soon and definitely next year when the 50th anniversary starts, I'd love to have them come on my station, and I'll just give them over the keys, so to speak, and I'll have you, anybody who's interested, host your own show on my station if you want to, if you want to get back into broadcasting again, especially those who've been out of the radio space for a while, want to come in, do a show. I'm leaving that open for anybody, any WBXL alumni who's interested. Please let me know, and I'll make it happen. You can get back on the mic, so to speak, and do your own show on my station. So please spread the word.
I'd be glad to.
And for that, that's the perfect place to end this. Thank you very much, Rick Deyulio, class of 1994. Have a good day, night, whenever you're listening to this. And let's go Bees. Thanks again for listening to the Buzz Goes Gold, a podcast celebrating 50 years of broadcasting excellence on WBXL 90.5 FM. This podcast is produced exclusively by the alumni of WBXL, with hosting duties by yours truly, Jordan Hayes, class of 07, and the intro voiced by Rick Deyulio. Many special thanks go out to WJPZ alumnus John Jag Gay, class of 2002, for the inspiration behind this podcast and his helpful tips and advice for making it go.